Hello, and welcome to Goddess Storytime, episode number 4. And today I'm going to talk to you about the goddess Hestia. Hestia is the Greek goddess of the hearth and the home fire. And she's also known in the Roman culture as the goddess Vesta. So I will kind of use them interchangeably because it's basically the same energetic frequency of the goddess Vesta from Rome and Hestia from the Greek tradition. Now, I have so much that I want to say about this goddess, so I'm going to feel into how to break down something that is so huge into a digestible piece for you today. So I would say that Hestia is not a goddess that a lot of women, a lot of people are familiar with unless you've studied the Greek and Roman goddesses. You've probably heard of Aphrodite, Athena, Artemis, Venus, Diana. These other goddesses kind of have a sexier reputation and are a little more well-known than Hestia. Hestia is, she's a more internal goddess. She's the goddess of the hearth and the home, the inner space. She's not so much concerned with being active in the outer world. So, Aphrodite is out there casting love spells and getting entangled in romance and drama, and Artemis is out there being a huntress in the forest and the woods and in nature, and Athena is involved in the cities and in war, and Hestia is at home. She is tending the hearth fire on Mount Olympus, and that just doesn't, I think, to most people in our current paradigm and our current cosmology seem as important. And what I would love for you to take away today is really understanding the importance of the internal space that precedes action, that coming into our inner state of alignment and beingness and feeling at home in yourself, how important that is before you're out doing all of these sexy awesome, active things in the world. And so since she is the goddess of the flame, she's the keeper of the flame, of the hearth, of the fire in the home and in the temple, I'm going to light a candle. And I always light a candle, when doing a session like this, but I wanted to make a point of doing it with you today and encourage you to light a candle at home. Uh-oh, uh-oh. Don't want that flame to go out. Let's do another one. And this is a beautiful beeswax candle that I have here in my workspace that I create and keep like an altar. She encourages us to bring the sense of the sacred into everything we do, into the everyday. And that sense of the sacred is represented by the flame. Now, I want to go back just a little bit. So on Mount Olympus, that's the home of all the gods and goddesses. And in prayers in ancient Greece and Rome, they would pray to Hestia first, and they would even say Hestia first and last, because they would begin any prayers with Hestia and they would end any prayers with Hestia. She bookmarked it. That's how important she was. And it was understood that she was keeping the spark, the flame of home, alive on Mount Olympus for all of these sexy gods and goddesses that were off doing all of these active things in the world. They would have no place to come home to that felt nourishing and sacred and like a sanctuary if it weren't for Hestia. And it's understood her importance is that without that, they wouldn't really have their powers. That's why she's first and last. She precedes any of that action in the outer world and the powers that they have in the outer world. It's like they would be completely diminished and gone if they didn't have that centering in the home space that she created. So the flame, she was always represented by a flame. And in the sacred city of Delphi, in her temple, which was a series of concentric circles that eventually came into the very center where the sacred flame was kept. And only the highest priestesses were able to actually observe the flame. And the highest task that was like the highest sort of status task was to actually maintain that flame, to be the keeper of the flame and not ever let it go out. And you would sort of slowly earn your way closer and closer and closer to the center of the temple where the flame was kept as you worked your way up in order of as a priestess. So we live in a world that focuses a lot on the outer space, on the outer world, how we're represented, like the ego mind, like how other people see us, how we're presented in the outer world, what we've done. You know, we live in a world that the current more wounded masculine paradigm that we're shifting out of has been leaned way into the space of your sense of value comes by doing, an emphasis on the doing and not as much emphasis on the being. And so it's interesting to think about a temple that you work your way up by getting closer and closer to the inner space. And she represents that inner space within our home and within each of us, the home as a sanctuary. So in a very mundane way, she represents having a beautiful home, creating a home. And when I say mundane, I mean in the day-to-day way. And it's very important as well. It's like these things that we do in our behaviors and in our day-to-day way. So keeping our home feeling like a sanctuary, making it a space that when we come home, we feel rooted, we feel grounded, we feel reminded of who we are and what we're here for. Because as we're out active in the outer world, we can come out of ourself, and our home being a place that draws us back into ourself. She is a great goddess to call upon for creating an altar, for creating sanctuary and sacredness in your home space, and having life force and vitality. So that brings me to the concept of the flame. So this flame represents Hestia. And not only was the sacred flame kept in the temple where her priestesses kept it, every woman in her house had a flame that she tended to, a fire that she kept that represented Hestia as well. And she herself was a priestess in her home, maintaining that flame. And when a young woman would get married, her mother would take some of the coals or some of the flame from her fire and bring it to the new household for the newly married woman to light her fire. And then it was kind of passing along this matrilineal connection to the goddess. So that now this home, through that matrilineal, through that mother line, now had a sacred flame within it. And this new bride would become the priestess of the household and tend to that flame. Not only was that done on a personal level, but when they would gain a new territory, a new colony or a town, there was in the sort of center of town, there was a flame that was kept, and the flame would some of that flame would be taken to the new territory so that it could become a part of the motherland. In a sense, like this new daughter would be inducted into the motherland and have that connection to the home, to Rome itself. And the passing of the Olympic torch is a tradition that 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 goes all the way back to this Hestia tradition, that it would sort of be this torch would be kept, and someone would ride for miles on a horse and then pass the torch to someone else and to someone else until it would eventually get to that town, and they'd have to keep that flame. It was absolutely essential to not let that flame go out. And we have to understand that in ancient times, a flame, a fire, was of utmost importance to any family, to any tribe, because it kept one warm. Recently when we had this polar freeze in Texas, and I was out in the country, and all we had was a fire to keep us warm, and there was no electricity and no light. Someone had to maintain the flame. Someone had to maintain the fire at all times and not let it go out, because it would be very difficult to get it started again. So this fire was really important on that fundamental level to a tribe and to a family. It's also representative of something much deeper. It's this life force and this vitality. So when you light a candle in a space in your home, you immediately feel that warmth. When you light a candle on an altar, when you bring something into your home space that brings vitality and life force and energy, you feel it. And it makes that place no longer just a house, but it makes it a home. And feel into what is the difference in a house and a home. And it's the feeling of presence. It's the feeling of love. It's the feeling of this life force that is there. And that flame is something that we see in a lot of different traditions. We see it in the Jewish tradition. Basically every spiritual tradition will have some use of the flame and have a very similar meaning attached to it, which is that it represents life force. It represents vitality. And it is also that inner flame of presence within ourself. So just as a house is not a home until it has that presence, a body and a being is not truly an alive, elevated being unless we have that sense of presence lit within ourselves. And I notice that, we live in a kind of a disembodied world where so many people are devoid of being present in their body, and they're completely living in their mind. And that's, with our computers and our phones, it's so easy to do that and to become disconnected to our physical self and our body and not have that flame of presence alive. And when someone does, you feel it. You feel when someone is really at home within themselves. They're breathing through their whole body. They're alive in their body. And, I would say that they are embodied. They are in a state of presence. And our presence is what brings the sacred to anything we do. And when we are embodied, there's a sense of the sacredness and a sense of presence that we bring to every moment that we're in. Now, again, there's so much. I'm trying to distill this down to a short video for you. I want to take a moment to just talk about this flame. And in the sacred temple of Delphi, this flame that was maintained by the high priestess was said to have an umbilical cord that went down to the center of the earth, to the flame in the core of the earth that lit that fire. Now, in the work that I do with women on breathing and bringing a sense of the Shakti, and Shakti being the word that translates in the Hindu language to divine feminine creative life force energy, it is this aliveness in many ways for women, this feminine creative life force. In the work that I do with women to awaken that within the body, we do a breathing practice. And in that breathing practice, I actually have us ground into our pelvic floor and drop a cord down into the very core of the earth and feel ourselves drawing that energy up through our breath into our pelvis, and then being able to circulate and move that energy. And in some ways, it's like you could visualize that it is a flame that is being lit. And you can almost imagine like one of those oil lamps that has that long wick right? That goes down into the oil, and then the flame is up here and lights it. And imagining that, when we drop that cord, we're going down into the oil in the sense that we're going down into the fuel. And we can then draw that up and then light the flame so that our womb space becomes like a holy temple. And just as we light a candle on the altar, we light a fire in the temple, we can light that fire within ourselves. So to keep this brief, I'm going to end there for today, but I'm going to invite you to start to feel into how you can root yourself down into the earth and into the ground and draw life force and energy up through into your own womb and feel that sense of connection, or feel into various ways that you can feel. Is that flame, is that life force lit within me? Am I being externally referenced or internally referenced? Hestia is a virginal goddess. And what that means is that she is whole unto herself. It doesn't mean that she never had lovers, or that a priestess that was a Vestal virgin never had a lover, but it meant she never belonged to anyone else. No one else was ever the center of her life. Now, this is an aspect of self that even when you're married and you're in a relationship, you want to have connection to. Your ability to be whole unto yourself, as well as be in relationship. Your ability to become internally self-validating, self-referencing, connecting to self-love and not needing that always to be externally reflected back to you. And the more that we're able to connect to this energy, the more that we're able to cut codependence patterns, and we're able to actually engage in relationships in a much more healthy way. So I invite you to learn more about Hestia, to feel into that for yourself, and to play with this concept of the internal flame within yourself. All right, signing off for Goddess Storytime episode 4. See you next month.